Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. It is a pleasure to be here with all of you, but it's even more of a pleasure to be standing next to my husband throughout this journey. Now, my husband and I, we share a lot of the same values, if not all of them, but we have a little bit of a different background. So I was born in Venezuela, and my family immigrated here to Montreal. We lived in the working class of Pointe-aux-Trembles, et c'est là que j'ai appris le français. And when my dad arrived here, he went from wearing a business suit, managing a bank, to jumping on the back of a pickup truck and picking up strawberries and vegetables, because that's what you had to do to feed your family. Because there's no greater dignity than to provide for your family. My husband has a little bit of a different background than me. He was born in Calgary, and he was born to a teenage unwed mother who had just lost her mom and gave Pierre out for adoption to two wonderful teachers from Saskatchewan. We had the same upbringing. We lived paycheck to paycheck. We were taught self-responsibility and to fight for everything that we had. Nothing was handed to us. Nothing. So years later, here we are, bringing those values and ready to stand up and fight for all of us so that we can have those opportunities, so our children as well can have the same opportunities that we had. So ladies and gentlemen, please stand up and welcome our fighter, the man of the hour, my husband, Pierre Poilievre.
Wow, thank you for that great welcome, Sudbury. Great to be with all of you. Wow, what an honor to be here in this great mining town. The people who supply the minerals that make our economy work and make our lives possible, the backbone of the nation. Thank you for being here today. I always get worried when my wife speaks because people end up liking her more than me, and they're going to want her to run for Prime Minister soon. But she is my inspiration, the mother of my children, and the great thing about marrying a Latin woman is you marry the whole family. And so my in-laws, her family are taking care of our little ones right now. We're very grateful for that. Without them, we wouldn't be here. God bless the Galindo family. Thank you very much, Hannah. I love you. And thanks very much, Charles, for the fine introduction. Relentless campaigner, worked hard. Did he knock on any of your doors in the election? Yeah, he got some doors, and the problem with him is he wouldn't stop knocking on doors. And even when it got late, they couldn't pull him off the doorsteps. And there was one night, it got dark, he kept going. They said, "You got to stop, Charles. You're going to start waking people up and losing votes." He said, "No, I'm going to keep on going." It was about 9:30 at night. He gets to a house, and the lights are off. They said, "Charles, don't do it." He says, "I have to do it. If I lose this election by one vote and I don't knock on that door, I'll never be able to live with myself." So he knocked on the door. Baby's crying. Door opens. It's the mom. She said, "You just woke up my baby twins. You're in big trouble, sir. And my husband is a champion boxer, 300 pounds. He's going to come down and have a word with you." And Charles said, "That won't be necessary. I'm just going to move right along. Tell him that the local Liberal candidate dropped by his house." Charles, when I got here to town, Ian said, "We have to go see some of the seniors in the area. The seniors built our country, and they deserve to have a visit from a future Prime Minister." So I walked into that senior's home and up to a lady, and I said, "Do you know who I am?" And she said, "No, but if you ask the nurse, she'll tell you who you are." It's good to be humble. Remember that we are servants and not masters as members of Parliament. Isn't that the case? And that's why people come here, right? They want to have freedom, the freedom to run their own lives, to make their own decisions, to choose their own government, that they can hold accountable for decisions that affect their lives. And that's why Anna's family came here from Venezuela, but it's also why so many millions of immigrants came to our nation over so many hundreds of years. In fact, my great-grandfather came from France directly to Saskatchewan il y a 100 ans, et c'était pour la même raison, pour pouvoir contrôler sa vie, pour prendre ses propres décisions, pour gagner une vie avec le travail et de pouvoir vivre en liberté. He wanted to live in freedom, just like everyone else. We wanted to carve a little piece of paradise out of that big, cold patch of land called Canada, right? Wilfrid Laurier was asked around that time, why and what is Canada's nationality? And even back then, it was very difficult to define because we were all mixed up. We had obviously the First Peoples. The First Nations have been in this area for 8,000 years or more. We also had the Scots, the Irish, the English. We had people coming from Asia already back then. And so we couldn't define our nation based on ethnicity. So instead, Laurier said something that I still think is true today. He said, Canada is free and freedom is its nationality. And so it is today. But lately, people have not felt so free in this country, have they? Whether it's the 14-year-old girl who's fallen deep into depression because of being separated from her sporting and social activities for the last 2 years. Or the waitress who mortgaged her house to start a business only to have it shut down so many times she couldn't open it up again. Or the trucker. Yes, the trucker. The trucker who is rightly called a hero for 2 long years as he drove across the border without a vaccine, delivering us the necessities of life to keep us all alive, and then suddenly became a villain because Trudeau said that this trucker, who's alone all by himself in a truck all day, is now risking spreading viruses to other people, and imposed a mandate that deprived that trucker of his living. And then when he went to Parliament Hill to raise his voice, he was called a criminal by Liberals like Trudeau and Jean Charest. Well, I got news for them. Our truckers are heroes. I was proud to stand with the law-abiding and peaceful truckers for their freedom and for their livelihood. And I will fight tooth and nail alongside fellow Conservative MPs to put a permanent end to the vaccine mandates and the vaccine passport. You know, and it's not just our medical freedoms that have been under attack. It's our economic freedoms. Whether you're the single mom who's skipping meals so that your kids don't have to, because food price inflation has made it so costly that 4 in 5 families have actually cut back on their diets to afford the grocery bills. Or whether you're the working guy, works in a mine, but can't afford to go and have a weekend of hunting and fishing because it's now $1.90 a liter for gas. Or whether it is the 32-year-old man living in his mother's basement because he can't afford the $874,000 it now costs for the average home in Canada. Just inflation, right? The reality is people feel like they're losing control of their lives. Mark Twain said that the 2 most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why you were born. Why? Why is the most important question we should ask every single day when we get out of bed and go to work. Why do we do what we do? I'll tell you why I'm running for Prime Minister. to make Canada the freest nation on earth so that you can take back control of your life. So let's start with inflation. Let's start with inflation, or just inflation as I call it. Anybody ever seen the big nickel?
Yeah. It's shrunk.
What's that?
It's shrunk.
That's right, because of inflation, the big nickel is becoming the small nickel, right? It doesn't buy as much as it used to. You make a really good point, though. Think about this for a second. You know, back in the days of Henry VIII, they used to, he was known for clipping off the heads of his citizens. He also used to clip off the edges of the coins, because they have the British pound, which is a pound of silver. And he'd always run out of pounds because he was spending so irresponsibly on himself and on all the aristocrats in his court. So he'd run out of coins. Sounds like someone we know, right? So what he'd do is he would shave or clip off the edges of the coins so that he could melt them down and make more coins. And that's why today, all these years later, we inherited from our British ancestors a criminal code prohibition on clipping coins. You know, if you clip the edge off of a quarter, you can actually go to jail. It's actually considered a crime in our law today. Does anybody have a quarter? You can lend me?
Not anymore.
Everybody's broke. A quarter? Nobody's got a quarter they can share with me? Yeah. All right. I'll give it back. I'm not a liberal. You see the edge of these coins? You know those little ridges on them? You ever feel that? You know why they're there? Well, so that if you try to shave off the edge, the person you give it to will notice that it's been contaminated with, it's been messed around with. And this was actually brought in England because of Henry VIII. And it was actually Sir Isaac Newton. We know him for being a scientist. He became the head of the Royal English Mint. And he used to throw people in jail if they clipped off the edge of the coin. Now here's the point of the story. What do politicians do when they cause inflation? They clip off the edge of your coin. You lost 6.7 cents of every single dollar over the last year because of 30-year highs in inflation. That means your dollar buys 6.7% less than it did a year ago. Think about this. If we had inflation at that level for 5 years, you would lose a third of the purchasing power of every single coin you have. Imagine that if over 5 years, a third of the entire big nickel were suddenly to vanish. You know, you'd have investigative journalists here, Unsolved Mysteries would be doing a documentary about it. What happened to a full third of the big nickel? Well, it's called just inflation, right? Now, how does it happen? Well, the politicians create more dollars to pay for their spending. You have more dollars bidding on the same number of goods, which drives up the price. You got an economy of $10 and 10 loaves of bread, it's $1 a loaf. But if you double the number of dollars to $20 and it's still 10 loaves, it now becomes $2 for a loaf of bread, right? More dollars chasing fewer goods equals higher prices. And so as I'm speaking, this quarter is worth less and less. I better pay it back. No, I insist. We need to pay our debts as conservatives. That's the difference. We're going to balance budgets. We're not going to borrow without paying back. But so when the government creates cash, you see everything goes up, and it starts with asset prices, right? Because the money isn't dumped out of an airplane. They created $400 billion of cash. And they pumped it into the financial system by buying government bonds from wealthy investors who then profit from it, and they lend out that money. And who gets those loans? Those who are connected to the financial system. Folks with lots of collateral, lots of credit, and lots of links into the financial system. They get the money first, and they get to use it before the inflation kicks in. They bid up the price of housing. Investors are now buying up our real estate like hotcakes. Even single-family homes in suburbs are being bought up by wealthy financial investors who then rent it out and are slowly turning our working class into permanent tenants in their own land, right? And then that inflation trickles down to other consumer goods, and we've seen everything go up. The price of food, of gas, of groceries, of your clothing, everything is going up. So what's happening is The super rich get wealthier because their asset prices inflate, and the working class get poorer because their wages are worth less. It's a transfer from the have-nots to the have-yachts in this country, right? And that's exactly what is happening. So what are we going to do to counter this just inflation? Let me start with the very practical reality that you don't have to print money if you're living within your means. So a Poilievre government will get spending under control so we balance the budget and we won't need to print money anymore. And here's how. Trudeau announced $100 billion of brand new spending above and beyond the core services the government was already delivering. I will cancel that $100 billion. 2, I'm going to get rid of the corporate welfare programs. They're designed to pad the pockets of the corporate insiders. We want businesses that make money, not take money. For example, the infrastructure bank. We need infrastructure. We don't need another bank. All this bank is meant to do is give loan guarantees to profitable corporations so that if they go over budget on big projects, they can pass the losses on to taxpayers. They get the profits, we get the loss. Meanwhile, they haven't completed a single infrastructure project with this bank while they've paid millions of dollars of bonuses to its executive. A Poilievre government will axe the multi-billion-dollar infrastructure bank altogether. And then I'm going to find another $1 billion of savings by defunding the CBC. I don't think they showed up here today. I don't see it. He's probably a great guy, okay? It's not his fault. It's not his fault. But that'll save us another $1 billion. And you know what else we're going to do? We're going to run the finances the way you run your household budget, by living within our means and bringing in a law to require it. Think about it. In the real world, you have to make decisions, this or that. Little Johnny wants to start skiing this year. Well, he's got to stop playing hockey. Or the family wants to go on a nice big vacation. Well, maybe the deck in the backyard will have to wait, unless you can find a way to get a bargain on both the vacation and the deck, right? Well, in politics, it's different. The great economist Thomas Sowell said, the first law of economics is scarcity. There's never enough to meet everyone's demands. And the first law of politics is to ignore the first law of economics, right? Politicians are the only creatures in the universe that don't live with scarcity. Every little microbe, every little fish in the sea or bird in the trees has to live with scarcity to make the maximum use of a scarce amount of resources, but not the politician. He simply passes on the extra costs to the taxpayer in higher taxes, to future generations in higher debt, or to the consumer through higher inflation. And so instead of doing either or decisions, they just do and decisions. I'll have this and this and this and this. Well, what if we had a law that required them to internalize the scarcity that they've been imposing on everyone else? It's called the pay-as-you-go law, and it's very simple. If a politician, our government, wants to introduce another new dollar of unbudgeted spending, he has to find a dollar of savings to pay for it. In the 1990s, in the United States of America, they had this law, the pay-as-you-go law, and they balanced the American budget for the only time in my lifetime, paid off $400 billion of debt. And then when the law lapsed in the early 2000s, the American government went right back into deficit. Cause and effect, folks. So a Poilievre government here in Canada will bring in basic discipline with a pay-as-you-go law so that it's not just the people that have to pinch their pennies, politicians will have to pinch their pennies too. And then we're going to extend that same discipline to the Bank of Canada. We had to, the Bank of Canada thrust us into a massive inflationary spiral. back in the 1970s under the first Trudeau, right? You know, Richard Nixon down in the South. It used to be in the United States of America, after the Second World War, the American government would give you, anybody in the world could get an ounce of gold for every 35 American dollars. That was the deal. That's how they kept the money hard. And then all the other major currencies of the world were linked to the American dollar. But Tricky Dick, Richard Nixon, ran out of money because he was spending too much on warfare and welfare. And he decided to break the link to gold and print money like crazy, and drove America into massive inflation, caused more wealth inequality, and we saw the big lineups at the gas stations because there were so many shortages. Pierre Trudeau looked down south of the border, saw all that misery, and said, let's have some of that up here. And so he printed money. We got 12% inflation, 12% unemployment, 19% interest rates. A few people in the room, 21, I just stand corrected, 21. Did you pay 21%?
Yes, our property.
On her property. And that's what misery resulted when they printed all that money. In fact, the misery was so bad that the suicide rate in Canada hit its peak in 1983 when all of that crisis was underway. And we wrestled inflation to the ground by putting in place a 2% inflation target that stayed in place for about 25 years. Inflation was low, it was almost zero, and people's purchasing power was protected. When Pierre Poilievre government takes office, we will reinstate that mandate for the Bank of Canada that it has a single purpose: to protect the purchasing power of our money and to keep inflation low. And we're going to give people freedom. We're going to give people the freedom to choose their own money. If the government's going to ruin our cash, then we should have the freedom to experiment with other money. And that includes non-governmental controlled currencies like Bitcoin. Yes, I mean, I would never force anybody to use it or subsidize its use, but Bitcoin was invented by a synonymous programmer after the US financial crisis in order to have a distributed, decentralized cash controlled by no bank and no government, but updated on a shared ledger by a majority of participants around the world who don't know each other, so that it cannot be manipulated by politicians and bankers. And I recently bought a sandwich with my Bitcoin when I was in London, Ontario, a nice shawarma. And are there any retailers in the crowd today? Maybe a restaurant owner or a corner store owner? Yeah, what do you pay in fees to the credit card companies on each transaction? A lot. I've heard it's around 2%. Around 2% of the transaction actually goes to the credit card company. Well, I paid for this sandwich with Bitcoin. It was a $10 sandwich, and I paid less than 1/10 of 1 penny in fees for it. In other words, you cut out the middleman. What we need to do is allow for the freedom, and in a level playing field with clear rules and penalties for anyone who commits fraud or breaks any traditional law, but allow people the freedom so that buyers and sellers can use other money that will bring competition, so the government does not have a monopoly on our money. Let's take control of cash in the hands of politicians and bankers and give it to the people. And you know what else we're going to do to fight inflation? We're going to recognize that using natural gas, oil, and propane to heat your home is not a luxury, nor is gassing up your car. It is a necessity. I will axe the carbon tax altogether. And instead of creating more cash, what we need to do is create more of what cash buys, right? So let's go back to my analogy. If you have $10 and 10 loaves of bread, instead of creating more cash, you double the number of loaves of bread to 20. You still have the $10. Well, then the bread would go down in price to 50 cents. So that's what we need to do across our economy. We need to remove the government gatekeepers that prevent people from making things in this country. So we'll remove the gatekeepers so we can build more homes, grow more food, and generate more Canadian natural resources. know that we have the fewest homes in Canada per capita of any country in the G7, even though we have the most land to build on, and the smallest population of any of those countries. Housing should be cheap in Canada. We have so much land that if you spread us all out evenly, we'd each have 33 NFL-sized football fields for ourselves. This would be a paradise for a hermit. You'd never see another human being around. Somebody applauded up there, so it might be a hermit. Normally you don't see a hermit in a crowd this big. But now, granted, our people are congregated mostly around bigger cities and closer to the United States border. But the reality is we have more land than we know what to do with. More land where there's no one than there is land where there's anyone. It should be affordable to build. But the problem is government gatekeepers block building permits and drive up the cost by driving down the supply of housing. So we now have the second worst housing bubble in the entire world, according to Bloomberg. Vancouver is the third most expensive, and Toronto the 10th most expensive housing market on planet Earth, ahead of New York City, ahead of Singapore, a tiny island that is overpopulated with no extra space to put people. And that is the result of the fact that in Vancouver today, local government regulations add $644,000 to the price of each and every unit of housing. In Toronto, it's almost $250,000. And now the Toronto politicians are talking about raising the development charges that people pay on buying another unit of housing. So this is causing a massive crisis. You know, I was asking in Vancouver the other day, you know, if you're 32 and still living at home, you can't afford a house, how do you even bring a date home at the end of the night? And a lady in the crowd yelled out, very carefully. And very quietly as well. So, but the reality is you lose the ability to save for the future if you don't have a home. You're paying someone else's mortgage off. You can't build credit, collateral, or a home equity for your eventual retirement. It's an attack on the personal psychological security of people. We wonder why so many youth are suffering with mental illness. Well, they feel totally insecure because the thing that makes you secure, a roof over your head, walls to wrapping around you, the shelter you need to survive, is not available to you here in our country. So I'm going to bring in some very serious carrots and sticks for our big city politicians to get builders building. Oh, we got some music going right now. What's the song you're playing there?
God's Country.
God's Country, right on. I don't have it in the hour right now. So, listen, this is how it's going to work. The municipal governments ask for federal infrastructure money. For big cities of more than 500,000 people that have overpriced real estate markets, they will have to allow a 15% annual increase in housing construction, or they will lose some of their federal infrastructure money. Very clear. But there will also be a carrot. Those municipalities of any size that remove bureaucracy and allow for more construction will get more infrastructure dollars to match it. The number of dollars will be tied to the number of homes actually built. Incentives work, and in the real world, you get paid when you get the job done. That's how my infrastructure program will work. We will stop printing money and start building houses in this country again. We're going to get the regulatory red tape off the backs of our farmers and our ranchers to produce more good food. We're going to take the carbon tax off of their fertilizer and their drying and their other off-farm expenses to bring down the price of food and to bring up the production of nutritious commodities here in Canada. And energy and mining. Let's talk about energy and mining. Isn't it a disgrace that in this country, with the third biggest supply of oil on planet Earth, we are importing 130,000 barrels a day of overseas oil, money that is leaving our country for polluting foreign dictatorships. Yeah. And where are the protesters, by the way? Right? Every time an indigenous community tries to build a pipeline or dig a mine, there's a bunch of protesters standing there trying to keep them in poverty, blocking them from working and building self-reliance and opportunity for their people. But every day, off the coast of New Brunswick, big tankers from the Middle East come shipping in all of that oil, and not a single protester shows up there to block them. So here's the Poilievre plan. Newfoundland proposes to increase its oil production by 400,000 barrels a day. I'm going to approve that increase so that Newfoundland can replace 100% of the East Coast imports of overseas oil. And within 5 years, I will ban dictator oil from Canada altogether. And we will repeal the No New Pipelines Bill C-69 so we can, we can build Canadian pipelines with Canadian steel that take Canadian energy to Canadian consumers, generating Canadian paychecks once and for all. It's not just oil, it's also natural gas. We've got 1,300 trillion cubic feet of natural gas that we could ship to Asia to help them shut down their dirty coal fire plants, and that we could ship to Europe as well. You know, we've got huge advantages in natural gas. One, BC is the closest point to Asia in all of North America. Newfoundland's the closest point to Europe in all of North America. That means we have a shipping distance advantage. You know what else we have? We have the advantage in turning gas into liquid. You have to liquefy it to ship it. You know how you liquefy natural gas? You cool it down. What do we have in Canada? Cold weather. It's our most abundant natural resource, cold weather. In fact, this past winter, it was so cold, Justin Trudeau was even seen with his hands in his own pockets. So the Newfoundlanders, again, they're going to pipe the gas from their offshore oil field onto the shore, put it on a floating vessel, cool it to minus 161 degrees, then ship it off to Europe to help Europe break its energy dependence on Putin so we can take dollars from dictators and turn them to paychecks for our people. And we're going to bring our mining sector roaring back. We need to dig mines in this country, right? The mines are what deliver us the essentials. See, you're holding your phones up there. All of those phones are chock full of minerals that are dug up in the ground from the ground, including in Sudbury and the nickel belt and countless other wonderful mines. We have diamond miners in this country. We have uranium miners. All of those minerals are necessary for a good quality of life, for our medical devices, and for our environment. These are the way that we're going to have a more clean, pristine environment, is to mine the minerals of the future. You know, we're spending all this money on electric cars, right? Buying cars with batteries that are made with lithium that is refined and manufactured in China, burning coal. What good does that do for the environment? The reason we're not doing it here as much as we should, because it takes 5 to 7 years to get a mine approved. My government will bring in a system that gives clear approval within a defined time period, that protects the environment, consults our First Nations, but gets the mines built so that we can do the upgrades, that we can build that stuff here in Canada. It takes getting the gatekeepers out of the way, doesn't it? The gatekeepers always want to come after the good guys, don't they? They have no time to go after the wrongdoers, right? Let me give you an example. Firearms. You know, the Trudeau government spending billions of dollars going after lawful firearms owners at the same time as they leave our borders open for smugglers. 82% of all gun crime committed in the city of Toronto, according to the police chief, is from illegal guns smuggled in from the United States of America, not from the lawful, licensed, trained, and vetted hunters and farmers who follow the law. A Poilievre government will respect our lawful firearms owners, will reject a long gun registry, and will put our money instead into protecting the borders and putting the real criminals behind bars. And then there's the speech gatekeepers as well. You know about them, right? The speech gatekeepers. You know, this new woke movement? Any woke folk in the crowd today? We got a Wokester. Is this a woke guy over here? He's getting around. We got one Wokester. Everyone's welcome. See, we believe in free speech. Even the Wokesters are allowed to come to my rallies if they want. You know, the other day I was in Toronto. We held an event at a brewery, at the Steam Whistle Brewery. And a bunch of the protesters and the Wokesters started bombarding them with emails saying, you have to cancel Poilievre's event. He has those unacceptable views that Justin Trudeau's always talking about. And, you know, to their credit, they didn't cancel the event. They allowed it to go ahead. Unfortunately, the place could only accommodate 650 people, and we had over 1,000. But then they felt they had to put out a statement saying they didn't agree with all of my views. And, you know, their politics are kind of watered down just like their beer. You know, I could have found a better location with stronger beer if they just told me that up front. But the reality is that the Wokesters don't want to have a debate because they know that if we have an open debate of ideas, they're going to lose, right? So they just censor people. They censor people. And I got Trudeau, the biggest Wokester of all, has got this Bill C-11, which would censor what you see and say on the internet. According to some experts, this would make Canada's internet the most controlled of any on planet Earth, right? Outside of dictatorships. Recently, they held a consultation on another idea that they had, which is to create a digital safety commissioner. So this safety commissioner is going to go online, pull down websites that he doesn't like, because he thinks that the ideas expressed on those websites may eventually lead to a lack of safety. Now let's be clear. Everything that's criminal in the tangible world is already criminal on the internet. If you see a crime online, you call the cops and the cops go after the perpetrator. That's not what this is about. This is about shutting down what Trudeau calls unacceptable points of view. And in the consultation he's done on the creation of this new Digital Safety Commissioner, some of the greatest experts have compared the proposal to what you would expect to see in North Korea, China, and Cuba. Now, of course, Trudeau has expressed his admiration for the basic Chinese dictatorship, as he did for the late Fidel Castro. So we know that he has these tendencies. These tendencies to try and control what people say and what they think. Because he knows he'll lose the debate. If he's forced to have a debate. That's why he doesn't want to face me in the next election, does he? He doesn't want to face me, so he's going to try to censor you and I so we can't get our ideas out, and everybody will have to funnel their thoughts through the liberal media that just regurgitates PMO talking points. So we, in this country, deserve the freedom of expression. A Poilievre government will repeal C-11, will fire any digital safety commissioner, and will uphold freedom of expression once and for all. I can't do it without you folks. I need you along for the journey, right? The politics is not a spectator sport. Thank you very much. I got your back too, my friend. Thank you. But you have a membership. You cannot vote if you don't have a membership. Now, before I can take on Trudeau, I have to become the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. Only members can vote, and that means you need your member. He's got his membership card over there. We'll give him a round of applause. We got a member. Oh, we got another member over here. Fantastic. Go to pierre4pm.ca. You can sign up right now. $15 gives you a chance to vote. And would you be my security officer here today? Okay, what's that?
Not a problem.
What's your name?
Susan.
Okay, anybody trying to leave the premises without a membership card will have to go through Susan, okay? Don't let them out, Susan. You tackle them to the ground, get them their membership. All right, he says I've got the right one. Don't mess with Susan. You'll regret it. Yes.
Can you get these memberships at the door there?
You can. We're going to get, someone's going to come on stage while I'm getting set up to meet you all in the lineup for photos. They're going to tell you how to get your membership, how you can do it right online at pierreforpm.ca, or fill out a little form, very short form. We don't have red tape in the Conservative Party. We keep it nice and simple. But I need you, no blue tape either. No tape whatsoever. We need you to sign up because this is a common effort for the common people. Freedom has always come from the bottom up, not the top down. Our history of freedom goes back to the year 1215, when the commoners forced King John to come to the fields of Runnymede and sign the Magna Carta, the Great Charter, the Magna Carta, which gave us no trial without jury, no arrest without charge, no taxation without representation, no confiscation without compensation. Those principles are here today because the commoners forced them on King John and forced him to sign those principles into a charter, and we inherit those blessings from ancestors who in many cases shed their blood so that they could protect them from for all of us. Our history of freedom might be 800 years long, but it is only one generation deep. As Edmund Burke said, it is a contract between the dead, the living, and the yet to be born to keep passing that freedom down the line. It is the duty of every living generation to do this. We owe it to our great-great-grandmothers and grandfathers and to our great-great-grandchildren to pass that freedom down the line unharmed and intact so that they can enjoy the same blessings that all of us had. I need you along for this journey. This is an active participation sport, politics, and we will do it in honor of all of those who come before us and will come after us, in the words of the great Canadian Prime Minister John Diefenbaker, who said, "I am a Canadian, a free Canadian, free to speak without fear, free to stand for what I think right, free to oppose what I think wrong, free to worship God in my own way, free and free. And in this freedom, I pledge to uphold for myself and for all of mankind." Thank you very much.